Welcome to the deep dive. Grab your source materials because today we are plunging into some pretty big philosophical ideas, foundational stuff.
Yeah, the kind of thinking that's, quietly shaping modern management.
Exactly. And our mission, like always, is to pull out the most important bits of the key knowledge and insights from these sources, specifically for you.
That's right. It's quite a journey we've got mapped out. We'll first unpack systems theory, then we'll sort of shift gears, explore postmodernism.
Which sounds academic, maybe.
A little, maybe, but then the fun really starts. We use those frameworks to understand what's happening now. Trends like sustainability, CSR, DEI.
Right, corporate social responsibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. These aren't just buzzwords.
Not at all.
And understanding the philosophy behind them, I think it's a shortcut, really, to grasping the big forces influencing organizations today. Powerful ways to see things differently.
Absolutely. They're like different lenses, Each one reveals different parts of the complex organizational world you're navigating every single day.
Okay, then. Let's unpack this, starting with systems theory.
Good place to start.
This popped up, mid-20th century? And it really changed the game, moving away from looking at just isolated parts.
Exactly. The core idea, the big insight, is seeing the organization as a complex system.
Yeah.
It's all about the deep interdependence of all of bits and pieces.
How they work together for the overall goals. It's holistic.
It is. Very holistic view.
And the sources mention a couple of key figures here.
Yeah, two really crucial names. Ludwig von Bertalanffy and Russell Ackoff. Bertalanffy, he was an Austrian biologist way back 1920s, 30s.
Right.
He was studying living organisms, and that led into this idea of open system.
Open systems, meaning?
Meaning living things aren't sealed off, right? They're constantly exchanging energy, matter, information with their environment. Breathing, eating, responding.
Okay, got it. So he took that biological idea
and built general systems theory from it. His big point was you have to study systems as wholes. You just can't understand something complex by cutting it up into pieces. He used the analogy of a car. You can take the engine apart, understand it perfectly.
But you still don't understand the car.
Exactly. Not until you see how the engine connects to everything else. The transmission, the brakes, the steering wheel, how it all works together. The whole system has properties, like being able to drive, that the engine alone doesn't have.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
That's the classic line, yeah.
Then there's Russell Ackoff, American guy, operations researcher, active a bit later, maybe 60s, 70s.
That's him. Ackoff was all about applying these system ideas, taking them out of the lab and into the real world. Messy problems, urban planning, education, corporations.
He pushed for systemic thinking.
Yeah, he really did. His insight was, look, you can't solve complex problems by just breaking them down and fixing each little piece separately.
Because fixing one bit might mess up another bit.
Precisely. The solution to one part often creates new problems somewhere else in the system. You need solutions that actually consider the whole tangled web of connections.
Okay, so if we boil down systems theory from the sources, what are the key concepts for understanding organizations?
All right, first up, interdependence. Simple idea, profound consequences. Changes in one part. They don't stay put, they ripple.
Like dominoes.
Kind of, yeah. Marketing does something, it affects product development, which affects sales, and so on. It's all linked.
Then holism. That greater than the sum of its parts thing. Emergent properties arise from the interactions.
Yep. Then open systems. Organizations aren't islands. They're constantly interacting with the outside world.
Taking stuff in, processing it, putting stuff out.
Inputs, throughputs, outputs. Resources, information, people come in, work gets done, products, services, waste, reputation go out.
And feedback loops, that's crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. Mechanisms for checking how things are going, gathering info on those outputs on how the environment's reacting, and feeding that back in to make adjustments. Like a thermostat.
And finally, equilibrium. Systems like balance.
They tend to strive for it, yeah. They try to return to some kind of stability when things get disrupted. Though, in today's world, that equilibrium might be constantly shifting. It's more dynamic.
Okay, to make this less abstract, the sources use Tesla's supply chain. Great example.
It really is a perfect illustration. Think about the interdependence. A shortage of one tiny chip from one supplier
can shut down the whole gigafactory.
Exactly. Halts production, impacts deliveries, revenue. Everything's connected. One hiccup ripples through the entire system.
And it's so clearly an open system. Tesla's supply chain is just buffeted by the external environment, right?
Constantly. Geopolitics, trade wars, natural disasters hitting a supplier. economic slumps affecting demand, they have to be incredibly adaptable, finding alternative sources, managing risks from outside.
And they use feedback loops like crazy, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. Monitoring delivery times, component quality, manufacturing costs, customer orders, all in near real time. That data feeds straight back into their operations.
Letting them spot problems, make adjustments on the fly.
Find bottlenecks, seize opportunities. It's constant tuning.
And their innovation, like developing their own batteries.
Yeah.
You could see that partly as trying to control more of the system, right?
For sure. Makes them less vulnerable to external shocks in critical areas, building resilience within their system.
So systems theory gives us this powerful way to see the connections, the dynamics. But it's not perfect. What are the limitations, the criticisms?
Well, one is the overemphasis on complexity. It's true, things are complex. But if you try to map every single interaction,
So you get lost in the weeds.
yeah, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
You spend so much time diagramming the system, you never actually do anything.
Okay, fair point.
Another is a lack of specificity. It's a great way to see the organization, a powerful lens, but it doesn't always give you like concrete steps for what a manager should do on Tuesday morning. It's more high level.
More framework than instruction manual.
Right. Then there's this potential deterministic bias. The idea that systems follow patterns or seek balance can sometimes make organizations seem predictable, almost like machines.
Which might downplay real innovation or radical change.
To do, yeah. It might underemphasize the possibility of breaking the mold, of fundamental shifts initiated from within.
And the last one mentioned is pretty significant, neglecting individual agency.
This is a big one. While people are parts of the system, the theory sometimes doesn't fully capture the role of individual choices, creativity, free will.
People aren't just cogs responding to system forces.
Exactly. Individuals can consciously decide to disrupt the system, change it, shape it in ways the theory might not predict well.
That point about individual choices, perspectives.
Yeah.
That's actually a great bridge to our next topic, isn't it? Postmodernism.
It really is. Because postmodernism dives right into subjectivity, perspective, power, all the stuff systems theory sometimes skates over.
So postmodernism emerged later, maybe late 20th century, and it's less about structure, more about questioning.
Questioning everything, almost. Especially the big assumptions we inherited from modernism, things like universal truth, objective reality, the idea that reason solves everything, grand narratives.
Postmodernism basically says, hold on a minute. Is there really one objective reality? One absolute truth?
Exactly. Its core insight is that knowledge isn't usually objective, it's subjective. It depends heavily on your context, your perspective, how you interpret things.
Which has huge implications for how we think about knowledge, power, even just the language used inside a company.
Profound implications. And the sources highlight some key thinkers who really shaped this view.
Michel Foucault comes up first. Absolutely central figure.
He explored that tangled relationship between power, knowledge, and subjectivity. His big idea. Power isn't just top-down, held by the CEO.
It's everywhere.
It's diffuse. It operates in subtle ways throughout the organization, in everyday interactions, in established routines.
And he said power is productive. What does that mean?
It doesn't just say no, it doesn't just repress. It actively produces what we accept as knowledge or truth or normal within an organization.
Ah, okay. Like how certain ways of working just become the way we do things here.
Precisely. Foucault would analyze the power dynamics that established and maintained that norm. He studied institutions like prisons and schools, looking at their disciplinary techniques.
Surveillance, routines, exams.
Right. All ways to shape behavior, produce compliant individuals. He argued our very sense of self, our subjectivity, is shaped by these practices and the language, the discourse that surrounds them.
Wow, okay. And there's Jacques Derrida, another French philosopher, famous for deconstruction.
Yeah, deconstruction is his big thing. It's a method, really. A way of reading texts or ideas or even practices to uncover their hidden assumptions, their internal contradictions.
To show there isn't just one meaning.
Exactly. He argued there's no single fixed correct interpretation. Meaning is slippery. He had this concept, difference.
Difference.
Yeah, it points to how meaning is always deferred, layered, never fully present. Language never quite pins reality down. For a manager, think about a company memo. Derrida would say that memo can be read and understood in vastly different ways by different people, depending on their background, their role, their relationship to the person who wrote it.
So the intended meaning isn't the only meaning.
Not by a long shot. The sources use the example of deconstructing the American dream.
Right. Presented as universal.
But when you deconstruct it, you see the hidden assumptions, the systemic barriers that make it unattainable or totally different for marginalized groups, despite the universal language. It reveals the fragmentation hidden by the seemingly unified idea.
Okay, powerful stuff. Then Jürgen Habermas, German philosopher.
Habermas offers a slightly different angle. He's focused on communication, democracy. He's critical of some postmodern extremes, but he emphasizes rational dialogue. Communicative action, he called it.
As a way to bridge different perspectives.
Yes, to reach mutual understanding, coordinate actions, even when people start from different places. He talked about the life world, our everyday shared understanding.
Versus the system, the formal institutions, the market, the state.
Right, and his idea of the public sphere as a space for open discussion is really relevant for thinking about internal company communication and culture.
And Nicholas Rose gets a brief mention, building on Foucault.
Yeah, looking at governmentality, how populations, including employees, are managed and governed, especially in modern neoliberal contexts.
So postmodernism, it's this critical lens. Look beneath the surface, question assumptions, see the power dynamics, recognize subjective views. What are the key takeaways for management?
Willingness to question, why do we do things this way? Whose voice is loudest? Whose is missing?
Challenging the dominant narrative.
Definitely. Second, relativism. Maybe not absolute relativism, but accepting the relative nature of truth and knowledge in many situations. Recognizing multiple valid perspectives.
So a manager needs to navigate those different subjective views.
He has to. Third, power and discourse. Really understanding that language isn't neutral.
The words we use shape reality.
They shape perception, reinforce culture, maintain power structures. Think about mission statements, performance review language, even casual office jargon. It all does work.
And fourth, fragmentation and ambiguity.
Yeah, embracing that organizations aren't always neat and tidy. They're often messy, full of contradictions, competing goals, uncertainty. Postmodernism says that's okay, maybe even normal. Don't search for a single, simple truth that isn't there.
So what does this mean for managers practically if you take this postmodern awareness seriously?
Well, critical reflection becomes essential. Managers need to constantly examine their own assumptions, their own biases. How might hidden power dynamics be influencing their decisions or their team's interactions?
It also seems to point strongly towards diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. If truth is relative and perspectives are subjective, then bringing diverse viewpoints to the table isn't just a nice to have for PR.
It's fundamental.
It's fundamental for getting a richer picture, for better problem solving, for creativity, for innovation. You need those different perspectives.
There's also an ethical dimension, isn't there? Awareness of how power and language can be used.
For sure. Potential for manipulation, for unintended harm. It pushes towards greater empathy, trying to understand those different subjective realities.
Admiring.
Flexibility and adaptability. If reality isn't fixed, if organizations are fragmented, then rigid structures and plans are going to struggle.
You need to be able to pivot.
Exactly. This lens helps explain why things like agile methods, flexible work arrangements, constant digital transformation, why they feel so necessary now. They're all attempts to cope with complexity, ambiguity, and rapid change, often driven by diverse customer needs and perspectives.
It's fascinating how these big philosophical shifts line up with real-world pressures. Globalization, tech changes, social concern.
They all feed into each other, shaping management thought, which brings us to where it gets really interesting.
Connecting the dots, using systems theory and postmodernism to understand today's big trends.
Right. Let's start with sustainability and corporate social responsibility, CSR.
Okay, sustainability. The core idea is meeting today's needs without messing things up for the future, right? Long-term thinking.
Long-term viability, exactly. And the sources break it into those three pillars.
Environmental, social, and economic. The triple bottom line idea.
Yeah. Minimize harm to the planet, positive impact on people and communities, and stay financially healthy over the long haul.
And CSR is related, but maybe broader. A company's voluntary choice to be ethical, responsible, beyond just following the law.
Right. It covers environmental stuff, but also social initiatives, charity, worker well-being, ethical sourcing, and governance transparency.
So maybe sustainability is the destination, and CSR is the vehicle, the practices you use to get there.
That's a good way to put it. CSR activities are often how companies try to achieve sustainability goals.
So how do our philosophical lenses help here? Systems theory seems obvious.
Totally. The systems lens just screams that environmental and social impacts aren't external to the business. They're part of the same system.
They're connected.
Deeply. Ignoring pollution, treating workers badly, that creates negative feedback loops that eventually hit the bottom line. Reputation damage, regulations, lawsuits, losing talent.
It forces you to see the organization as an open system interacting with its environment. You can't just ignore the outside world.
You have to manage those interactions, those inputs and outputs, because they will affect the internal system.
Okay, and the postmodern lens. How does that apply to sustainability and CSR?
It makes you immediately critical of the discourse, the language.
The PR spin.
Exactly. Is the company's glossy sustainability report the whole truth? Or is it a carefully constructed narrative, using language to create an image of responsibility?
This is where greenwashing comes in, a major criticism noted in the source.
Precisely. Greenwashing is using the language, the discourse of sustainability without making real systemic changes. Postmodernism, by questioning that surface truth, helps us spot it. It asks, does the talk match the walk? Or is power, like marketing power, being used to shape perception?
The sources use Unilever's sustainable living plan as a case study.
Yeah, it's presented as a really comprehensive effort, setting hard targets for reducing environmental impact waste, water emissions, and for improving social conditions, like empowering women in their supply chain.
They had specific initiatives, sustainable palm oil sourcing, community programs.
From a systems theory viewpoint, you see Unilever trying to manage the vast interconnectedness of its global operations with its environmental and social context, using metrics as feedback loops, monitoring progress, making adjustments across that huge system.
And the benefits they reported, better brand image, cost savings from efficiency, more engaged employees, show those positive feedback, right? Addressing social and environmental parts improve the whole system.
Right. Though a postmodern lens might still ask critical questions about how progress is framed, whose voices are included in defining sustainable, and so on.
The sources also mention thinkers who influence environmentalism. Rachel Carson.
Silent Spring, absolutely fundamental. It shifted our view to see ecosystems as interconnected systems, cause and effect across species and the environment.
And people like Herman Daly questioning endless growth.
Yeah, steady state economics.
Yeah.
Challenging the modernist economic narrative within the finite system of the planet. Arnie Leese's deep ecology gives intrinsic value to nature, questioning the human-centered narrative, very postmodern feel there.
Beyond greenwashing, what other criticisms of sustainability CSR come up?
Well, the real trade-offs between sustainability goals and short-term profits. That's a constant tension within the organizational system.
Hard choices have to be made.
Definitely. Then measurement challenges. How do you accurately measure social impact? Or the value of biodiversity? It's tricky.
And cultural differences. What's considered responsible or sustainable can vary a lot around the world. Makes global initiatives complex.
True. Okay, let's shift those lenses now to diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Hugely important today.
Yeah, let's get the term straight first. Diversity. That's just the mix, right? The presence of variety.
Who's in the room? Different races, genders, ages, backgrounds, abilities, sexual orientations, ways of thinking, the whole spectrum.
Then equity. That's different from equality.
Very different. Equity is about fairness, about access. It means recognizing that people might start from different places or face different barriers, and we need to address those systemic issues to give everyone a fair shot at success.
So it's about giving everyone what they need to succeed, which might not be the same thing for everyone.
Exactly. Equality might be giving everyone the same box to stand on, but equity is giving everyone the right size box so they can all see over the fence.
Good analogy. And inclusion.
Inclusion is about the feeling. Creating an environment where everyone, regardless of their diversity, feels welcomed, respected, supported, valued, and psychologically safe to contribute fully.
Feeling like you belong and your voice matters once you're in the room and have equitable access.
Nailed it.
So why is DEI such a big deal now?
Yeah.
The sources list benefits.
Yeah, several key ones. Enhance creativity and innovation. Diverse teams just bring more perspectives, more ideas, challenge assumptions better, leads to more robust solutions.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, employee engagement and satisfaction.
People who feel included, valued, treated fairly, they're generally more motivated, more productive, more likely to stay.
And reputation. Good for attracting talent, good for customers, stakeholders.
Definitely. Organizations known for strong DEI are seen more favorably.
If we think about the history, civil rights, feminism, These were fundamentally about challenging the existing social and organizational systems, weren't they?
Absolutely. And challenging the dominant discourses, the narratives, the assumptions that upheld inequality and excluded certain groups.
Questioning the established truths about who belonged, who got opportunities, pushing for recognition of different experiences. Very postmodern in a way.
Very much so. Highlighting marginalized perspectives, challenging power structures.
Johnson & Johnson is the case study here. Strong reputation for DEI.
Yeah, they've apparently done a lot, setting representation goals, not just for gender, but race, disability, lots of employee resource groups, ERGs.
Those groups where employees with shared backgrounds connect.
Right. Plus things like unconscious bias training, trying to tackle assumptions, supplier diversity programs, community engagement. It's broad.
From a systems theory perspective, you can see them trying to adjust multiple interconnected parts of their organization: hiring, training, procurement, community relations.
To create a more equitable and inclusive overall system. Using metrics, presumably, as feedback loops to track progress and see what's working.
But the postmodern lens makes you ask,
Yeah.
okay, are they just focused on the diversity numbers, the who's in the room?
Or are they genuinely tackling the deeper issues of equity and inclusion, the power dynamics, the subtle biases embedded in the culture and language?
That brings us straight to tokenism, another key criticism.
Right. Hiring a few people from underrepresented groups for show to tick a box without changing the underlying system or making sure they actually feel included and have equitable opportunities to advance.
Using the discourse of DEI for image management, while the old power structures remain largely intact.
That's the postmodern critique, yeah.
What other challenges or limitations for DEI?
Resistance to change is a big one. From people who are comfortable with the status quo or hold biased beliefs, that's a real social system challenge.
Like sustainability, measurement challenges. How do you really measure inclusion or the true impact of bias training?
Hard. And the risk of hypocrisy. Companies talking a good game for PR, but not living it internally. Again, the postmodern lens is sharp here.
And cultural differences again. What DEI means and how you implement it effectively can vary hugely across different global contexts.
Adds layers of complexity for sure.
Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really have, from systems theory's big picture, interconnected view,
to postmodernism's critical eye on truth, power, language, and subjectivity.
And then seeing how these lenses help us really analyze what's going on with huge contemporary trends like sustainability and CSR.
Thinking about long-term viability, ethics, environment economics.
And diversity, equity, and inclusion. Building workplaces where everyone feels they belong and can thrive.
It really shows that management philosophy isn't just some dusty academic thing. It's alive, it's evolving, and it helps make sense of the complex world you navigate at work every day.
Absolutely. So the big question then, what does this all mean for you?
Yeah, here's something to think about. Given what we've discussed, postmodernism's focus on subjective truths, systems theory's emphasis on interconnectedness, how could you approach challenges like greenwashing in CSR or tokenism in DEI with maybe more depth, more effectiveness?
How do these ideas, interconnection, feedback loops, power, discourse, subjective perspectives actually show up in your own workplace? Can you start to see the system dynamics? Can you maybe deconstruct some of the language or narratives around you?
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into the philosophy shaping modern management.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Keep exploring, keep questioning the systems and the stories.
Welcome to the deep dive. Grab your source materials, because today